Totally Football Show today. Champions League returns. We take stock on the shocks as the big sides get out the blocks. Simeone's Anfield pain. Bayern with Harry Kane. Lloyd Kelly for the old lady again. And a historic Carabao Cup performance that may bring Mourinho-vation at Benfica. Plus, what Angers Forest did next, what Amorim's cooking up for this weekend, a song for Madueke and more in this Totally Football Show. Thursday the 18th of September, listener. Thank you so much for joining us. Here in the studio, we've got Colin Millar. Hey, Colin.
Hey, James.
Lovely to see you. Duncan Alexander's in.
Hello.
And back from the tennis circuit, Charlie Eccleshare.
Hello.
What have you enjoyed most so far, Colin?
So it's been a week of comebacks, hasn't it? I mean, from Carabagh's win at Benfica, they were 2-0 down after 15 minutes. They win 3-2. The crazy Juventus-Borussia Dortmund game. 2 goals in the last minute after being 4-2 down. Bodo Glimt came from 2-0 down against Slavia Prague to draw. And then obviously the Carabao Cup as well, getting in the action with Nottingham Forest blowing their 2-goal lead at Swansea, 2 last-minute goals.
Who's their manager?
Ange is back. Ange is back. But yeah, I mean, I think this week as well in the Champions League, those matches were really, throughout the tournament, have been really well matched. I think a lot of those teams are in similar sort of seedings and similar levels, and I think that's made it a lot more entertaining as well.
Do you think it was seeded, the draw?
I think the way UEFA do this, and this is actually quite curious, isn't it? That it seems to be that the stronger the team, the more difficult their run of matches seems to be. I don't know how their seeding system works for how those games are drawn out. But I remember last year
for the opening game you're talking about.
No, but for the entire draw.
Chelsea, world champions, have got by popular consent the toughest draw of all.
Yeah, and it was. I don't know if they've done this for this season, but for last season it was Celtic who were in the lowest seeded pot. Had statistically the easiest.
And PSG had the hardest.
Run of fixture. PSG had the hardest. And now obviously they went on to win the tournament, but they had finished sort of mid-table. And they had to go through the
they just scraped in.
Yeah, they just got in.
I mean, we simply don't know because now the draw process is Kaká or someone will press a button and the fixtures emerge.
The sadness is that we had Pedro Pinto with us only the other day. If anyone could have told us, it would be...
He was mashing a button in the background, but I don't know what it was doing. So.
We'll never know. Charlie, what have you enjoyed so far?
Well, I made the decision to stick with Liverpool Atletico last night. Yeah, despite saying to Charlie when he asked me what game I'd be watching, I said, well, I'm going to start with Liverpool, but if it's uncompetitive quite quickly, I might switch over. And I was this close to change. If they got a third, I was out of there. I was done, but I stuck with it. And I'm glad I did because it was very entertaining.
Very entertaining. It kind of snuck up on us that I stayed watching Bayern Chelsea and so was aware of, but not caught up in, events at Anfield. Right.
Yeah, I was similar to Charlie. I was flummoxed. I was like, Liverpool 2-0 up. This isn't their DNA. How are they going to score a last-minute winner in this game? But fortunately, they did.
Quickly check on some of the headlines from what's been a busy few days. Bayern beat Chelsea 3-1. Bayern have now won their opening Champions League match for the last 22 years. Incredible statistic.
They're in a good moment.
Yeah.
The 21st century.
Chelsea defeated, but other English sides fared better. Spurs were 1-0 winners against Villarreal, thanks to a crazy own goal from the Yellow Submarines keeper, Luis Jr., after 4 minutes. Arsenal had a comfortable 2-0 win away to Athletic, while Liverpool beat Atletico, witnessed by Charlie, although it took yet another late winner to do it. This one courtesy of Virgil van Dijk in the 92nd minute after Adelaide had come back from 2-0 down. So far then, it's Premier League 3, Liga 0 this week, but we do have Newcastle-Barcelona still to come. Elsewhere, Paris Saint-Germain thumped Atalanta 4-0. Real Madrid beat Marseille 2-1, but lost Trent to a hamstring injury and Danny Carvajal to a red card for headbutting. And Inter were 2-0 winners at Ajax. Game of the round so far, or certainly second half of the round, was Tuesday's clash between Juventus and Borussia Dortmund. The first half was goalless. The second was the joint highest scoring in the history of the competition. Juve, who were trailing 4-2 in the 94th minute, somehow then scoring twice to snatch a point. And while all that was going on, also on Tuesday was Benfica Carabao, in which Benfica went 2-0 up, then forgot how to play football, ended up losing 3-2, and that is why Benfica are now looking for a new manager, and it may be you know who. Finally, shout out to the Champions League debutants, Paphos of Cyprus and water park fame, who drew 0-0 at Olympiacos. Bodo Glimt of the Arctic Circle, who came from 2-0 down to draw 2-2 at Slavia Prague. And the Belgians, Union Saint-Gilloise, who went and won 3-1 at PSV. Ooh, in a spicy Low Countries derby.
Benelux mania, yeah.
The records say Liverpool 3, Atletico Madrid 2 in Wednesday night's clash at Anfield. Charlie Eccleshare, is it me or are these late winners getting to be a habit?
Yes. Yeah, I mean, the obvious question is whether, this is going to be, well, if they're winning games but not playing amazingly, then how good are they going to be when they click and they're going to win by 5 every week? Or is it, well, they've got to get found out eventually?
But it's a good habit to have, isn't it?
It's definitely a good habit to have.
It's not a good habit to need, but it's a good ability to have.
Well, that's it. I think how we look back at it will depend on what happens next, because if they do suddenly get some bad results, we'll say, well, yeah, I did always think that you can't, it's unsustainable. And if they don't, we'll say, yep, they were just waiting for their new players to click and now they have, and look how amazing
they were winning in second gear.
Yeah, exactly. So
Sunday, Salah's penalty against Burnley meant that they became the first team in Premier League history to score winning goals in the final 10 minutes of 4 consecutive matches. And after having a quite bizarre 2-0 lead very early on against Atletico Madrid, they needed a similar get-out-of-jail card courtesy of Virgil van Dijk in the 92nd minute.
This was slightly different from some of their games, like Bournemouth, for instance, where they kind of looked crazily exposed and, thought Bournemouth were very good value for those 2 goals.
And Bournemouth are really, really
and Bournemouth
good.
Are really good. This game, I kind of think 3-2 flattered Atletico a bit. On another night, Liverpool might have just won this like 4-1 or something and we'd be having a different conversation. Like they weren't, despite conceding 2 goals, I didn't think they were quite as vulnerable defensively.
So it wasn't a brave comeback from Atletico?
I mean, it was in that they stayed in the game.
Dangerous lead and all that.
Yeah, but they didn't do loads more than stay in the game and then pinch a couple of sort of half chances.
They themselves could have had a late equaliser.
Yes, that was probably a better chance, certainly than the equaliser.
It was 7-1 on Opta-defined big chances, which is how you should view all games for me.
But that kind of passes the eye test.
But I think there's a lot of misconceptions about Atletico Madrid outside of Spain, and that they are now much more defensively vulnerable, I think, and you could see that in this game. They still have that competitive edge to them and they love these occasions. But my issue with this Atletico Madrid team is partly beyond their control, in that within domestic football, they are so far behind the pool of Barcelona and Real Madrid, relatively speaking, yet they're so far ahead financially of all other 17 teams in that league. They almost have this perpetual season of finishing third, of getting to the round of 16 in the Champions League, or maybe the quarterfinals, and then dropping out. And it just seems to be like they're stuck in this identity crisis whereby they don't really know, should we evolve? Can we evolve? They're trying to spend a lot of money to do so, but for me, they're standing still. So it's games like this which are really interesting. And maybe that's why we saw at the end of the match Diego Simeone becoming so emotional with the fans, which is, we don't actually really see that a lot. We see him emotional with the players and what's happening on the pitch, but for him to have been clearly so distracted by what was going on behind him was quite striking, I thought, and maybe spoke to just how much this game meant, even maybe not in the grand scheme of how their season will pan out, but in terms of what they are and what they're treing to be.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, clearly something did really wind him up that was said from behind him.
An early bath for you, Mr. Simeone. I read a lot in the last few hours about Marcos Llorente's dog, Anfield, on the back of his continuing his excellent form.
Good
That's
name for
4
a dog.
goals in. Is it a good name for a dog?
Well, I think the only problem would be, as a dog owner, you sometimes say your dog's name out loud and then something for it to look at. So you might say, dog's name, squirrel. If you said Anfield and then cat, then people might think you're referring to the early Twitter Anfield cat phenomenon. So, yeah, that is a danger. But I think it's a good name.
Okay. And it was another good performance from him, although, Charlie, as you say, perhaps the scoreline flattered them a little bit. The game also featured the first start for the most expensive player in the history of British football, a.k.a. Alexander Isak. How did he look?
Kind of as you'd expect. I mean, a bit rusty. There were some good touches. There was a lovely link up with Wirtz, which, again, that's the sort of thing. If those two can develop an understanding and click, then, yeah, that's going to be pretty lethal, you would have thought. He lasted, about an hour? which I kind of felt this game was almost an investment to get him ready for the Merseyside derby on Saturday.
Merseyside derby on Saturday. And Florian Wirtz?
Yeah, again, I mean, like some really nice touches, floating around the pitch, really hard to dispossess. And yeah, you do feel, I mean, he very nearly scored as well.
I think it was his best game so far. Created five goal scoring chances, and just he looked more connected with Salah as well for the first time. So I think it was Salah's best game as well of the season so far.
Yeah, I mean Salah missed a sitter as well.
Hit the post,
which would have made it 3-1 and sort of killed it.
What was looking particularly good, the Atletico Madrid kit. Colin, where's that out of? They look like a handball team or something.
Yeah. And it's in these games you sort of see these kits coming up. Maybe you don't see quite as much in domestic. I liked it.
Did you like it?
Yeah, I quite like it. I think I like unusual away kits. They stand out. I mean, if Atletico had won that match, that kit would instantly become iconic for a lot of their fans, I think.
Don't like a central badge with a brand logo still to the side.
It's very 2005 Nike era, but I don't know. I don't mind it too much. But yeah, I mean, I think, as I said earlier, I think one of the interesting things for this is for these games in general is obviously Liverpool got that last minute winner and the euphoria around that. How much does that mean for Liverpool? Because they're, as with all these Premier League teams, I think they're going to at least get into the playoff phase of this league phase. And there's 8 games in which to do that. So how much do these individual results matter?
In terms of performances?
And not so much in terms of performances. I mean, I know, and obviously you can carry that momentum into the Premier League, but in terms of the final outcome in the league phase, is that I think Liverpool will finish top of 8. I think Atletico will probably be in the playoffs anyway. So
unlike a tournament, say like a World Cup, where if you lose your first game, you're in real trouble.
Yeah,
you've got essentially you need 5 wins. I think that's the general estimate.
5 wins and then maybe a draw.
So you got 8 chances to do it.
Yeah.
Anyway,
I mean, the sad reality is that for a club like Liverpool, the main advantage, what you want to do is what they did last season. Get your top 8 place secured early, and then you can rest players for the final 2 in January when all the players are knackered. Like that's kind of what adding those extra games is. That's one of the things it's created.
Everyone points out PSG came 15th in the league last year and won the trophy, but then Barcelona, Arsenal, and Inter, the other semi-finalists, came 2nd, 3rd, and 4th. So I think the league table was a pretty good indicator of strength last season.
We shall see what impact Wednesday's exertions have on Liverpool this weekend when they take on Everton, a fixture we'll touch on more a little bit later on. Meanwhile, of the Premier League sides, Chelsea had maybe the toughest assignment. The world champions were away at FC Bayern, where they got beat 3-1. 2 of the Bayern goals coming from Harry Kane, who had a bit of I guess they call it a Meisterklasse. Playing so deep now, and he's so good at it.
That bit towards the end where he turns, I think it was Chalobah maybe, and then just runs like half the pitch. Not especially quickly, but he's so strong as a runner that he just covers the ground. He eventually ended up fouling Enzo Fernandez, but just incredible, obviously on top of the amazing finishing ability that he has.
A lovely assist as well for his 3rd goal from, Chelsea's Malo Gusto. Chelsea didn't help themselves in what was a difficult fixture.
Yeah, but I think those are linked, right? In the sense that Kane was dropping so deep and Chelsea's build-up play was getting disrupted so much because I don't think they really knew where the Bayern players were. Obviously, there was a high press as well. I think it is worth sort of talking a little bit more about Harry Kane because Jamal Musiala is sort of long-term injured. He's kind of filled into that creative void as well. And Sebastian Stafford-Bloor wrote a really good piece on this in The Athletic about how Kane's role has evolved at Bayern and how he's really fitting into this Vincent Kompany system. And I think Bayern are one of those teams, especially under Kompany, you're not really quite sure what to make of them because nobody really seems to have them down as a tournament favourite, even though you've got Kane, you've got obviously players like Musiala who's out, but Michael Olise yesterday was fantastic. And I kind of think when you're comparing Bayern...
Richard Diaz as well is looking great form.
Yeah, and when you compare those 2 starting 11s, I think Bayern's is clearly above Chelsea. I think a level above Chelsea's. Yet I think a lot of the sort of tone around the coverage of this match was like, well, Chelsea are going to be disappointed to have lost this game and, maybe it shows they're a little bit naive in this stage. But I just think Bayern have better players. I think that's the reality of this.
Certainly savvier players as well, for the Champions League. There's something about you, like Bayern at home especially, you do, I don't know, they have this way of sort of making your life quite difficult. I know Chelsea actually did great a decent number of chances. But Bayern just looked that bit more
Especially
sort of
September,
experienced and streetwise.
Oktoberfest.
Yeah, exactly.
They're all, you know.
Everyone's merry.
Yeah. It's their time of the year.
Well, that's why they keep winning their opening games, sort of out of respect for cultural norms.
They are the most September team of all time, I think.
Cole Palmer, once again, with Chelsea's goal after his strike on the weekend. What a goal it was too.
Lovely. And he had another one disallowed.
If you watch when he runs forward with the ball, his scanning, as they call it, is just the way he turns his head. It's almost like an owl. A skillful owl. But yeah, it was a lovely finish.
What do you think when he scored what was a consolation goal at that point? He still did the kind of trademark
Very
celebration.
brief,
it was brief, and it was almost like he
Commitment
felt
to the brand, I
embarrassed.
think.
I guess it is, but then the karma of it then being
was like
disallowed.
for the bean counters, he could I definitely did it. But for the fans, I wasn't doing it much.
Chelsea have another big away game coming up on Saturday when they visit Old Trafford. Bless. Take on Man United. Yeah. Again, we'll touch on that when we do Premier League things later on. Colin, you were about to...
Yeah, no, I just think with Chelsea, obviously, talk about Cole Palmer and star player and how much of an impact he makes, and you saw that last night. I think Liam Delap's injury has really changed the way they play because Joao Pedro, who Maresca said prefers playing deeper in a number 10 role, he's now their number 9.
Right.
So essentially what they have is he's dropping deep, so they've nobody to stretch in opposition defence and create then that space behind them. I think you could sort of see that a little bit last night. That they've so many attacking players who have a similar mould, but they don't have a Delap replacement. And obviously the guy who could have been that competitor
Nicholas Jackson
was Nicholas Jackson.
Nicholas Jackson came on. So what's the problem? Oh yeah, he was playing for Bayern.
Spurs 1-0 winners against Villarreal. Lucas Bergvall, after his stellar performance of the weekend, again with a big impact here, but not quite as big an impact as the Villarreal goalkeeper.
It really was.
My goodness.
It might be the worst thing
extraordinary.
I've ever seen, I think, particularly at that level of football.
Describe it for anyone who didn't see this, Duncan.
So Bergvall crosses the ball on the ground, and the keeper dives out, sort of facing the ball, and then sort of, I don't know, just like...
Scoops it into his own net,
It's
basically.
the sort of thing you might do when you're playing football with a kid and they sort of have a really tame shot, or with a mascot or something, and you kind of gently throw it in, and then everyone's like, "Hey, they've scored!"
No, it's gone in.
Yeah, exactly. It was really bizarre.
After that, and I was watching the game in Turin, but it didn't seem like a huge amount happened in that match.
No, it didn't. I mean, having made a good decision on Wednesday, made a bad one on Tuesday.
Oh, you watched this?
Game. Yeah.
So Spurs had, I think, just combined 2 shots on target in the match. But they did get a 4th clean sheet in 5 matches, so...
Yeah, I mean, it's been a real shift, obviously, as we expected. Thomas Frank coming in, replacing Ange. Yeah, I mean, again, it's a bit like Liverpool, that I think there are kind of some bubbling concerns that their attack hasn't really clicked. So I guess it's kind of the opposite of Liverpool. But defensively, they do look really secure. And, if the attack does click, then we'll be talking about these great foundations that have been laid. I think my sense with Frank Spurs is that, I think they will have home games where they struggle. We saw that against Bournemouth. I think they're going to be so much better, as we saw against City, against kind of stronger teams that attack them.
So Brighton at the weekend could be a good one.
Well, yeah. I mean, I guess it depends what sort of, how Brighton approach that game. But yes, but I think Spurs, it's definitely hasn't quite clicked in the attacking sense.
But it's the right way to do it, isn't it?
Yeah, it is,
I mean, sort out the issues and then build the attacking patterns as you go on. I think that's...
Arsenal, also looking good. 2-0 winners away to Athletic Club de Bilbao. Squad depth, strength off the bench, Colin.
Yeah, Gabriel Martinelli and Leandro Trossard came on and made instant impacts in this game. I didn't think this was Arsenal's best performance. It was a very similar type of display as their league game at Anfield quite recently, and that they didn't really seem to have much to any attacking ambition whatsoever, but they just wanted to nullify the game, quieten the crowd. And I actually thought Athletic Club played pretty well. They certainly for the first 20-30 minutes they were in the ascendancy, but this kind of a little bit like the Spurs game, there weren't many clear-cut opportunities in this. But yeah, the subs make a difference, and you could see that with Arsenal's massive investment this summer. They haven't really lost any players that would have sort of been involved in that starting 11. So they have a lot of different options now, and I think that again, this is a game that last season they probably wouldn't have been able to do that, right? They wouldn't have had those options.
Bring on Raheem Sterling or Kieran Tierney or something. So yeah, it was exactly for this sort of situation that they made all those signings. So they had actually viable options to bring off the bench.
But Martinelli, a player who not a new arrival, and one indeed whose star is a little bit faded of late. So this is a big goal for him.
Yeah, it is. But I mean, he's one of those players who's. I've always felt this. Martinelli's the kind of player who. Back in the day, Arsenal had Sylvain Wiltord, who was a kind of great 12th man. You wouldn't have necessarily wanted him starting. And I think Martinelli could have I think he'll become a lot more popular almost the less he plays, when you're coming on. And I felt the same with someone like Giroud, who kind of, his crime was that he was playing every week, which he shouldn't have been. He should have been this like amazing impact guy. But more
popular than the less he plays.
But do you know what I mean?
I do know
you become...
He's a cameo merchant.
Yeah, and Martinelli as well. He has... I think the Champions League, he scored a few of these types of goals, which you never really see him scoring in the Premier League because teams don't play that kind of high line against Arsenal in the Premier League. But he scored one at the Bernabeu and Sevilla away, and then this was a great finish.
He had to score that goal.
Or a great goal, anyway.
Because Madueke was right there.
Yeah, he was.
You could see Madueke seeing him shooting, thinking this better go in. Oh, it has, fair enough.
And I say a great finish. It was actually one of those where it does enough, but he kind of flummoxes the keeper because it's almost straight at him. It's so close to him and he kind of dives over it.
Speaking of Madueke, by the way, we were asking on Sunday what song Arsenal fans could sing for their new right-wing star, their new star on the right flank. Listener Ollie Holmes gets in touch to say the Noni Madueke chant surely has to be to the tune of Michael Jackson's Smooth Criminal. Annie, are you okay? Noni Madueke. Madueke.
There was. I can't remember the tune, but there was a new Madueke chant last night.
Right.
And it wasn't that.
It wasn't as good as that.
No,
well done, listener Ollie Holmes. Tuesday, a couple of fascinating matches in the Champions League phase. We'll talk about Juve Dortmund very shortly, but Benfica's 3-2 defeat at home to Karabag was the first ever victory by an Azerbaijani club in the Champions League. How about that? Karabag, the champions of Azerbaijan coming from 2-0 down to win this. It was also the last game in charge of Benfica for Bruno Lage. He was sacked pretty much on the spot. And word then circulated that Jose Mourinho could be set for a sensational return to the Stadio da Luz 25 years after his brief spell in charge of that club at the very beginning of his managerial career. Now, back then, we talked about this a little bit in a totally extra about Mourinho's Porto, which topically enough, we did the other day. Back then, he only lasted 9 games due to a change of president. There were elections. The guy who came in had already promised the role to somebody else, and Mourinho wasn't a name at the time. So he went kind of I wouldn't say, there's a similar vibe to what's going on now because they've got an election coming up next month. Rui Costa, who's currently the president, is pushing for Mourinho. But a gentleman named João Noronha Lopes, or probably João Noronha Lopes, who is also up for the presidency, wants to bring Ruben Amorim in from Manchester United. And why wouldn't you? Where are we at? Because I think everybody wants to see Jose back, and because they've got Chelsea next month.
I think the expectation is that it will be Mourinho. Obviously, he had a fairly abrupt exit from Fenerbahce last month, and he's available. And I think that would be a good fit. To go back to Benfica all these years later. Obviously, he went on to have his legacy with Porto initially, which is what most people kind of initially associated him with. But I think it would be great. It's great for football to have Mourinho present at some level. Right. I think it's good for the narrative. It's good for the news industry as well. But also, one of the things I would want to say about this game is that Benfica sacking Bruno Lage after this. Karabag's manager is Gorbanov, who's been in charge for 17 years.
Crazy.
Right? And he has a track record of not developing these players, but bringing in guys from really humble backgrounds, lower divisions in other countries, sort of developing them into a team. They sell them on for big fees, and then they almost universally flop at other clubs. Even for this game, right, 2 of the goal scorers, Camilo Duran and Leandro Andrade, were signed from Portugal's second division. So these were guys who picked pretty much from nowhere, and they've made an impact. And they were the entertainers in the qualification phase. They scored 15 goals in 6 games. Obviously scored 3 goals at Benfica, which is no mean feat. So it's a really interesting club, Karabakh, and not just for what they're doing on the field, but for what's going on off it as well. So for those who don't know, Karabakh currently play in Baku, which is the Azerbaijan capital, but they're not from there. They're essentially a refugee club who in 1993, with the war between Azerbaijan and Armenia over the disputed territory, they are from Agdam, which was in that territory. And because of the fighting, they essentially had to flee that town. It became a ghost town, and they've played in Baku since. And then they had they're funded, and they became the dominant club in the country. But there's now plans after the recent phase of hostilities in that area that Azerbaijan are now looking to move that club back in to Agdam, into the original stadium, which is politically obviously quite contentious and what's going on. But Karabakh, to be on the stage they are in a sporting sense, that for Azerbaijan, I think as a country, that club is incredibly important for what they project, because not just that they're the best team and they're from Azerbaijan, but they're from that area. And that there seem to be a very, very well-run club who have been certainly in a kind of league phase of Europa League usually, but it's sort of sporadically in this competition now.
I covered a home game of Karabakh in Baku many years ago, and it was actually when they were playing, it was for a previous employer, they were playing Arsenal, and it was the time, you remember that was the season where the final was in Baku as well, but they played Karabakh in the group stages, and Mkhitaryan couldn't play as an Armenian. They couldn't guarantee his safety. I mean, it was kind of extraordinary situation, the fact that a final was in a place where a player who could potentially get there and did get there. But I do remember speaking to people and, saying, yeah, is that right? That feels good, because it's hard to imagine that level of security concern. Everyone was like, yeah, there is absolutely no way that he can play this game. But it was an amazing stadium and an amazing atmosphere. But they ended up losing that game, Karabakh.
But also even just for a kind of club, I mean, we say Eastern Europe, but maybe even further away, but for Eastern European clubs to be succeeding in this stage is an increasingly rare thing. And it's probably is a good thing for football as an industry to have clubs from that part of the continent who are actually able to compete at this stage and aren't just sort of there and losing every game.
Good thing for travel as an industry as well. It just struck me that it was Benfica who caused Jose Mourinho's untimely exit as Fenerbahce boss, because they beat the Turkish side in the playoff, and Mourinho was dispatched straight afterwards, and now could take over the club which had knocked him out, which will please James Horncastle, who in the big Champions League preview on The Athletic was lamenting Fenerbahce's exit and Benfica going through, saying they've denied us 8 Jose Mourinho pre-game press conferences, 8 Jose Mourinho post-game press conferences, and all the narrative and content that could have been there.
Do we definitely still want all that? I mean,
yeah,
we haven't reached saturation point with him.
Watch his Benfica play, not so much, but
but you want all the stuff around it still.
Yeah, I mean, do you not?
I don't know. It just feels like one of those things where if enough people say, "Oh, but you can't deny he's still box office," that you kind of have to believe that, and it's like, is he still? I don't know. I just don't know how much there is to learn about. I love Mourinho. I covered him when he was Spurs manager.
Because obviously covering Spurs when he was there, yeah, and it was pretty bleak at points, wasn't it?
Yeah, and I mean, he was great to cover. It was entertaining, but that was still we're talking 5 years ago. I guess now, from the distance we're at, you get the kind of bite-sized chunks and. Maybe that is still good. I don't know. It just feels like one of those things we kind of are told and have to accept. And I'm just not sure the reality is maybe that entertaining anymore.
I hear you. I had a different perspective when he was Roma boss. But when I read about him potentially moving back to taking over at Benfica, my heart leapt a little. Anyway, we'll see. We'll see what happens. Maybe we'll have news on that tomorrow, aka Friday, when we do our special Totally Extra. Meanwhile, Tuesday, as I mentioned, game of the round or second half of the round, Juve 4, Dortmund 4. So Juve had a 4-3 with Inter at the weekend, and then they have this game here, which is only the second game in Champions League history to produce 8 second half goals. First half, was anybody else watching this? No. First half, I don't think any of you saw the first half. Nothing would suggest that you'd made a bad call on that. But the second half began in a really blistering fashion. Dortmund under Niko Kovac are to be fair, a much better coach side, a much better organised side than Juve are right now. And they really started to kind of turn the screw on the old lady. They took the lead. Juve managed to equalise very rapidly. Dortmund then retook the lead even more rapidly, and you kind of had this back and forth. However, about 75 minutes in, Lloyd Kelly was, I think, a bit harshly adjudged to have handled, and a penalty was given, and Dortmund were now 4-2 up, and it really looked like that was that. Bit of a sting for the old lady in her return to the competition. But a couple of players who'd come on, Jean-Mario on the right flank, and above all, Dusan Vlahovic. Dusan Vlahovic's relationship with Juventus has been kind of hot and mostly cold for, I think, 3 seasons now. But what he did in this match was extraordinary. He's always on the point of leaving. The club are always trying to looking to move him on. And I guess that'll be the end of this season. That'll happen, or maybe at Christmas, because this is the last year of his contract. But it's rare you see a player drag his team across the line quite as much as Vlahovic did here. He scored 2 goals, set up another, but was just so angry, so full of passion, and so clinical in his finishing that we ended up with this amazing situation. Juve 4-2 down in the 94th minute, and then drawing 4-4 a couple of minutes later. Final goal coming from Lloyd Kelly, who'd started the scoring in the 4-3 against Inter at the weekend. Madness. We should also shout out for Kenan Yildiz, who scored a brilliant goal at the weekend and had another one here. But
a lot of spectacular goals.
A lot of spectacular goals. Dortmund absolutely gutted. I mean, a point away to Juve is not a bad result, but they looked distraught.
Well, that was as well, because when they were up 4-2, and just from the highlights, it looked reasonably comfortable, and their defender, I'm not sure who it was, gives the ball away, kind of playing out a bit unnecessarily. Again, a sign, it looked like if they felt very comfortable, almost felt the game was done. They got punished in the most kind of brutal way, and then a couple of minutes later as well.
But it was 4-2, and I think the 4th minute of stoppage time at the end of that game. It does feel like this happens to Dortmund a lot. Like, I mean, they're on the brink of these great results in Europe, and somehow contrive to throw it all away. I think that must play in your mind a little bit as a player. But yeah, maybe less characteristic as Juventus, who just seem to be incredibly entertaining, and like a lot of flair and a lot of attack-minded players on the pitch. And
strange, because they've had attack-minded players. Yildiz was there last season, but incredibly entertaining was the last thing you just said about them. And to be fair, Igor Tudor coming in didn't really make me think they were going to move the needle much on that. But can't argue with the kind of scorelines they're having. That was, by the way, if you're curious, the latest that a team has ever come back from 2 goals down in a Champions League match.
Really?
Yeah, and also I'm fascinated with Lloyd Kelly's career, and he only scored 3 goals in 141 games for Bournemouth. Obviously, then went to Newcastle briefly before Juve, but that's 2-2, and that was the latest goal Juve have ever scored in regulation time in the Champions League. Which, for a club with their history, he's interesting.
I guess, though, that's slightly misleading in some ways, because there have probably been teams who've trailed by 2 goals on aggregate and managed to turn those around. Like, I'm sure Real must have done that, even if on the night they weren't.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
I do know what you mean. But I'm not sure if it would have been that late, though, to score goals in the 94th and 96th minute.
Yeah, maybe.
Kind of unusual. Inter, by the way, who were on the wrong end of that 4-3 last Saturday in Serie A, they kind of got their season a little bit back on track. They'd had 2 consecutive defeats. They went to Amsterdam to play Ajax and won 2-0 with 2 identical were the goals. I was busy watching the Bayern-Chelsea game, and I was convinced I was watching a replay because they were both out-swinging corners from Hakan Çalhanoğlu, who was also in brilliant form last Saturday, and 2 headers from Marcus Thuram.
I think we might be in a golden season for headed goals. There's been a lot so far, including these 2. So I think,
it does feel like in general defenders aren't as well coached at heading the ball out because of the other sort of focus and playing out with your feet, obviously. But it does feel like that is an area that teams are maybe exploiting a little bit more.
Long balls and headers is the future.
Weren't we always told as well that with VAR and things that you can't get away with so much pushing because you're being scrutinised? So maybe there's an element of that too.
Perhaps so. Anyway, so the other Nerazzurri from Serie A are Atlanta, who went to the European champions, Paris Saint-Germain. and didn't last very long. What, 3 minutes in, PSG?
Yeah, Marquinhos turning up in open play inside the box and with a poacher's finish. And throughout, PSG could have won this game 7 or 8-0. They really, really could have. The chances they were creating and missing were extraordinary, but it does speak to the freedom that they have in that team that Marquinhos was there. Obviously, Mendes with a goal inside the box, and Hakimi missed 1 or 2 really good chances with his runs inside the box. So essentially, you've just got all these positional switches and incredible fluidity. And you don't want to say a team are favourites for the tournament because it's a competition, it's a knockout, a lot of things can happen. But the way in which they play, without Dembele, without Doué for this game too, that just doesn't really seem to impact them at all at the moment.
And the goal from Kvaratskhelia?
Oh yeah, that was just
describe it, Colin.
Because he's so Kvaratskhelia. If you don't even really need to describe the goal to know what it's like with him, because he's a player. He'll pick up the ball, he'll drive inside, he'll take on defenders, he'll have that sort of physicality to ride the challenge, and then to unleash a shot from outside the box that is virtually unsavable because it's hit with so much power and so little backlift. He's just. I think that is the sort of player that any club would want in their team, a winger who's obviously got all the talent, all the creativity, but has that other side to his game too, that competitiveness. And I just think he had the impact with Napoli, but now to have it with PSG and what they did last season, it's just, I just love him as a player.
Just to Colin's point about they could have won it 10-0, they had 10 big chances. I'm into that metric today. Which is more than 4 teams did in the entire league stage last season, and only 5 fewer than Milan managed in 8 games. So.
While you're pondering on that, consider too the fact that Union Saint-Gilloise, who were the kind of Cinderella team of last season in the Belgian Jupiler Pro League, is it? Jupiler Pro League, Colin? Yeah.
Yeah, it is, yeah.
They won the title for the first time in their 90-year history. Is that right? Last season? Or the first time in 90-something years. In a long time, listener. Then qualified for the Champions League and went to PSV Eindhoven and beat them 3-1. Canadian striker Promise David scoring their first ever Champions League goal. He's not related to Jonathan David, also of Canada. But people who are related include 2 other scorers. Kevin McAllister, Alexis' brother, and Ruben van Bommel, who's son of Mark, for PSV.
Ruben van Bommel, by the way, obviously son of Mark. He's the maternal grandson of Bert van Marwijk, the guy who
former Dutch manager.
He coached him in the World Cup final, and I sort of had this game on in the background. For him to be on the losing team, he was so clearly the man of the match. He was absolutely brilliant, and I hadn't really been aware of him before. He'd been at AZ Alkmaar. But his goals and assists back this up, and all the sort of data behind it suggests that this guy is actually a really, really talented player. But in this match, he was absolutely fantastic. Let down quite a lot by terrible finishing elsewhere within his team.
Of the round, possibly the season, in fact, comes in this.
Yeah, let down by bad finishing. And Union were clinical. And again, because they're the sister club of Brighton, this isn't overly surprising that they've got really smart recruitment, and they tend to pick these players out of kind of obscure leagues and end up doing really well. Obviously, Promise David, who was signed from Estonian football last summer, and he was aged 23, so he wasn't like a 17, 18-year-old. So, and he's scored 27 goals last year. Obviously not a full Canada international. So yeah, they're a really interesting club. And yeah, for this game, it's good to see them having again this platform, because had this league phase not been expanded, we maybe wouldn't have seen their games as much. And yeah, I think this was a really interesting game, and a lot of good players.
And for anyone wondering whether Kevin McAllister is named after Kevin McAllister, he is.
He is.
Yeah.
What's Ruben van Bommel's gain then? He's less sort of, because his dad obviously was this terrifying enforcer, but that's less his vibe.
Yeah, so he's like this winger, but I haven't seen too much of the Eredivisie, but he is a really direct. He takes players on. He's got really accurate crossing. He's got a really powerful shot to him as well. But he's just, again, we were speaking about Kvaratskhelia earlier. It kind of reminds me of him in his gameplay, and couldn't really contrast more with his dad, who, as you said,
he did get sent off in the under 21 Euros this summer.
He did.
So, You know, the DNA is in there.
We shouldn't conclude our Champions League chat without mentioning Real Madrid. Colin, 60 seconds on what they did against Marseille.
Went 1-0 down. The Timothy Weah shot from Marseille. Timothy Weah, by the way, 3 years earlier, George Weah, his dad, of course, scored for PSG in the Cup Winners' Cup at Real Madrid. Real Madrid came back into it. Kylian Mbappe scored twice. So he's got 50 goals for the club in just over a year, which is pretty remarkable considering
Both penalties, huh?
Both penalties, the second of which was incredibly contentious to the point. I mean, it was a handball decision. The initial shot by Vinicius was blocked by the defender, and then the ball sort of landed in the safe area and ricocheted off the arm of the defender, whose arm was
sort of fell
breaking his fall.
Yeah.
So again, I just don't really understand how that could be given. But yeah, this match had 41 shots across the entire game, which is very much a Roberto De Zerbi type match. And we saw quite a lot of Brighton where he would have taken his teams away to Arsenal, Liverpool, Chelsea, played really open, really expansively, taking the game to them. That's exactly what happened here. But yeah, probably a little bit more finding out about Madrid under Xabi Alonso. Vinicius didn't start this game. Mbappe did. And I think a lot of the talk now is how Mbappe has sort of made that position his own. He's now the central striker. He's the main guy at Madrid. And obviously they've had a strong start to the season and they've won all their games domestically too. So
and Trent's hamstring went.
Trent's hamstring. They also got a red card. Did you mention that red card?
I didn't know. So Danny Carvajal had a slight. I wouldn't really say uncharacteristic moment of madness in leaning his head slightly aggressively into the goalkeeper, and it was deservedly shown a straight red. And Trent could miss the return to Anfield at I think that's the end of October, start of November. Yeah. But it's estimated he could be 6 to 8 weeks out, so it could be touch and go. But that's obviously a blow for Madrid going forward.
Absolutely.
Also, a Bruce Springsteen song, 41 shots.
Is it Bruce Springsteen?
American Skin brackets, 41 shots. Yeah, about someone who was shot by police 41 times.
Makes you think. League Cup. Wednesday, the third round got underway. Actually, Tuesday, the third round got underway. And there were some remarkable results here too. Ange Postecoglou's Nottingham Forest went to Championship side Swansea City. They went 2-0 up. They were still leading 2-1 after 93 minutes. But they ended up losing 3-2. 3-2. Yikes.
Which, given Ange at the weekend said, you'll see my team properly on Wednesday.
That's unfortunate.
It is.
Elsewhere, last round's giant killers, Grimsby, you recall, the League Two side who defeated Manchester United. Well, they won again, now beating Championship outfit Sheffield Wednesday. 1-0. Yazid Kabir with the only goal. That's his sixth of the season. The Mariners of League Two, as I mentioned, through to the last 16. Well done to them. The All-Premier League affair between Brentford and Aston Villa saw the Villains score their first goal of the season, finally, courtesy of Harvey Elliott. However, Aaron Hickey's delicious volley saw Brentford pull level, after which Villa lost 4-2 on penalties. Their difficult start to the season continues. Palace also needed penalties, meanwhile, to see off Millwall in a rematch of that very nasty FA Cup clash back in March. You recall, saw Jean-Philippe Mateta off and half his ear off as well. Penalties it went to after the 1-1 draw, and Palace won 4-2 on the spot kicks. The remaining 12 third round ties will be taking place next week. With that in mind, let's move on to what awaits this weekend in the Premier League. It's round 5 already, bookended by 2 huge matches. Saturday lunchtime, things get going with Liverpool against Everton, and then Sunday 4:30, Arsenal Man City brings the curtain down on the round. In between, Burnley hosting Nottingham Forest, Brighton facing Spurs. There's another derby for West Ham because the last 2 have gone so well. This time it's against Crystal Palace, who are still unbeaten. Wolves are taking on Leeds, a 6-pointer. Then there's Man United, Chelsea at 5:30 on Saturday, which is the most drawn fixture in Premier League history. And at 8 o'clock on Saturday, another of those late ones, Fulham Brentford. Yeah. Sunday, 2 games at 2 o'clock, Sunderland against Villa and Bournemouth Newcastle. And then that Arsenal Man City game. What about the derby then? At Anfield Saturday lunchtime, Everton haven't won at Anfield with fans in attendance since 1999. David Moyes has never won at Anfield. He's had 20 attempts there as a Premier League manager. What are his chances this time?
Well, to Charlie's point earlier, I think this is the moment we see where the Liverpool starts the season is, second gear cruising, or, there are issues. Because Everton have been really good. I mean, Jack Grealish has been transformative. They've actually, as per the Athletic's alternative Premier League table out every Thursday, Everton have led for longer this season than Liverpool in games.
Oh, this week's alternative table is which team has led for longest?
Yeah, led longest this season and a bit of last season as well, if you want to look at that. But yeah, Bournemouth lead the Premier League. But yeah, Everton, I think, are 5th and Liverpool 7th. So, I mean, as you'd expect, the team that scores a lot of late winners. But I think maybe people haven't really, I don't think Everton been on TV much yet, so probably haven't watched. But they're attacking play. I mean, it's classic Moyes. They're tight at the back, but then he's now got players up front who can keep the ball and make stuff happen. So I'm looking forward to this.
I mean, I guess Colin was talking about earlier how consequential Liverpool winning or drawing that game is. I wonder if one consequence of the fact that what looked like it could have been a sort of 3-0 after half an hour cruise can rest everyone and sort of start thinking about Everton, the fact that they did actually have to keep going until the 95th minute, whenever they scored their winner, whether that has an effect, given it is quite a tight turnaround from Wednesday night to the early Saturday game. I mean, that's what Everton will be hoping for, obviously.
The slot, pun intended, that Jurgen Klopp used to have a lot of
used to despise, yeah.
So true. Yeah, that psychological almost draining.
Yeah, exactly. It wasn't...
And it's the 5th game in a row that they've had that. Or maybe you have the boost of morale of being able to...
Of knowing...
Overcome the odds, is it?
Yeah, I mean, we can obviously argue both sides of the fact after the match, but yeah, I do think that Everton will have had a week to prepare this game, and David Moyes, he'll have a plan for this, and we know how this game is going to go. I think when you looked at Liverpool's game against Burnley last week, it was quite intuitive in that a team who didn't really have much interest in attacking them, but had a really low, deep block, and how much Liverpool struggled with that, really. And that could be, I don't think Everton will go to that extent, but they'll have better options in the final third, as Duncan said. So it'll be interesting to see how this game balances out. You'll imagine it will be quite low scoring and it will be quite nip and tuck, but Everton will probably enjoy that and relish it, and they'll be looking at, if the game does go into the final 15 or 20 minutes and still in the balance, they might have a little bit more energy to maybe get a result.
Arsenal-Man City is the 4:30 Sunday game, but we'll talk about that in Friday's show after Man City play Napoli. Man United, meanwhile, are up against Chelsea, who similarly haven't won at Old Trafford since May 2013, when Sir Alex Ferguson was still United manager. And the Chelsea boss was?
Rafa Benitez.
Yeah. Will Chelsea fancy their chances of a rare win at Old Trafford this weekend?
They got to be one of the only teams that hasn't won at Old Trafford in the post-Ferguson era.
Yeah, that is extraordinary. I mean, they're on this run of 4 straight away games. It's their third or four in a row. Chelsea, yeah. But I found yesterday, even though from what I saw, it looked like, they created chances and things like that, but I do just find them off. They often just do look quite unconvincing a way that they have their moments, but they can't really string it together. So, I mean, yeah, you'd think this is an opportunity. United, how much they'll benefit from having a week off.
The same applies with the Liverpool game. Obviously, it's slightly later on the Saturday, but Chelsea had their game in Germany, had to travel back, and again, are maybe not demoralised after the result, but they're not exactly going into this on a high note. And I think Charlie's right. I've seen quite a bit of Chelsea this season, and there's just something missing, isn't there? There's not in the sense that they're clearly a good team. They've clearly got good players, but they just don't strike me as a team who are going to challenge for either the Premier League or the Champions League this year. And then you kind of think, so what will constitute a successful season? Because there does need to be an improvement on last year. And I look at some of the players that they've signed.
Difficult given that they became world champions.
Well, galactic champions.
There's a lot of narrative around this game, but I do think that Manchester United, obviously they need a result, right? Ruben Amorim needs a result.
What's he been cooking up on the training pitch this week? That's what we want to know.
What formation?
Who
can say? could be anything.
Does he even need a result? Can he not just lose this and stare in despair at the floor and still retain his position?
I think from a United point of view, this is genuinely quite a difficult opening run of fixtures, okay? Yeah. So I think there is that sort of leeway. They're not going to rush to get rid of him because they don't have a replacement lined up for a start. Yeah. And I don't think there's any real desire within the club. I think the fan base is a bit different. But if they were to win this game, I'm not sure they will, but if they were to win this game, it could provide somewhat of a spark with the fact that they don't have the midweek games anymore, that they could go on a little bit of a run of form. But because they don't have the cup matches, it makes all the league games that much more important, because they won't have that.
It is
that
crazy.
sort of
not even having
momentum.
the Carabao Cup. It's kind of crazy. I mean, they're playing so few games.
Right.
But I mean, whether that's a benefit, I mean, you'd assume it would be overall. But yeah, that, like Colin says, that does create a slightly different dynamic and a challenge.
Man United, Chelsea, Saturday tea time. What else catches your eye from the round? For example, could Villa's miserable start get worse Sunday lunchtime when they travel to Sunderland, who've won both their home games so far? What about West Ham and Graham Potter? Will West Ham's home game with Crystal Palace, again, as one wag observed this week, see West Ham fans staying to the end to avoid the rush? We shall see. And what about Burnley, Nottingham Forest after that Swansea City collapse? What next for Ange Postecoglou? You've also got Brighton, Spurs, Fulham, Brentford, and Wolves, Leeds. Leeds manager Daniel Farke has had 7 Premier League matches against teams whose names start with W. He's lost all of them.
No W's.
Crikey. It's the worst 100% losing record by a manager against teams beginning with the same letter in the competition ever.
I think that came from my former colleagues at Option. I'd like to distance myself from that. In the business, that's known as, we need 10 facts for this game. We've got 9. Oh, I can't find the 10th.
But that will be the most quoted tweet stat you'll see from that.
Really?
Lots of people will be...
Really?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a whole other conversation, but I think there's a lack of discernment when it comes to stats and data a lot of the time. That you kind of hear something and then repeat it because it sounds like a big number or something. And then you're like, does that mean anything? Like, what are we learning from that thing you've told me? Or is that just a coincidental thing that's happened? Data and done well, brilliant. But I just think a bit more critical thinking.
Well, we'll see.
We
they
will.
lose this
Is
one,
that,
then maybe you'll reconsider your position, Charlie. But
just
okay.
on the games, though, was Brighton Spurs, that fixture was 3-2 last season, 4-2 the season before. So last season, Spurs were 2-0 up at half-time. And the other season...
but this is a different Spurs.
It is a different Spurs, yeah. But that's been a good one.
They've been to Man City without conceding. They've been to West Ham without conceding. Can they do that at the Amex? Question mark.
You're right as well. You said before, this, in theory anyway, should be a game they are a bit better set up for. I guess it is an interesting test for them. And also the coping with the Champions League, Premier League dynamic, which is very different to the Europa League because, yes, it's Thursday, Sunday, but with that, certainly in the groups, you can rotate quite a lot in a way that you tend to do less in the Champions League.
All right. What do you expect from that meeting of managerial minds of Burnley, Nottingham Forest, Parker v Postecoglou?
2 contrasting styles, it's fair to say. And I mean, both going into this, not with pressure, but with results behind them that maybe aren't overly beneficial. I do think that, for Nottingham Forest, I know it was away to Arsenal last week, and that's obviously a very difficult game in itself, but I think there's a lot of underlying signs, even at this stage in the season, that it could be problematic going forward, not just because they've got a lot of football to contend with, and obviously with the injury record that we know had been associated with Ange Postecoglou at Tottenham and the training demands that he has, but what players are suited to the system he wants to play, and we've gone through that, but it just feels to me that they could have a very difficult season, and games like this could actually be quite important at the long term, just to make sure that they're not going to be dragged into part of the table that they don't want to be, and won't have that distraction from their European games, which is what a lot of the fans will be looking forward to. So this game could be quite instructive, and just to see how can they approach a match against a team who probably will sit off a little bit, and will be difficult for them to contract. A
Burnley side who diffused Liverpool so very effectively for almost all of last weekend's clash.
To lose that. They were unlucky to lose to Manchester United the game before. I think Burnley will stay up fairly comfortably.
Really?
Yeah, I think so. So I could actually see them winning this, and more crisis rolling into the Trent.
What about Aston Villa and their trip to Sunderland? The Athletics, Will Jeans pointing out that Chris Wilder has been sacked by Sheffield United and reappointed by Sheffield United in the time since Villa last scored a goal. Crikey. In the Premier League.
Yeah, they scored in midweek. That's they got that. That's
Yeah.
on the board. Tough. I mean, Sunderland have been good so far, particularly at home. Roof's in goal. It's got a very high ceiling. And you could see him keeping them out for another game.
Shots on target are only as good as what you do with them, I guess. Villa have had 10 of them across their 4 games this season in the Premier League and have scored none. Sunderland have only had 9, but have scored 5. Wow. Football, eh? West Ham Palace? Are things about to get even worse for Graham Potter, do you think?
Well, I think if he loses this one, then it is, crisis stations, to butcher a phrase.
Crisis station.
I'm inventing it. I'm going with it.
Right.
I mean, to lose at home to Chelsea,
Panic
bad.
talks down at West Ham.
To lose at home to Spurs,
Maybe
badder.
seen as misfortune.
Yeah, but to lose... I mean, Palace do have a pretty good record there.
They've won 4 of their last 6 meetings against the Hammers.
It's concerning.
I think with West Ham, it's not so much that they're like a chronically bad team, because in games they tend to start okay and you see, there's little patterns here and things, but as soon as they concede a goal, they tend to just fall apart. They capitulate. Like they concede in batches of 3 or 4 within like a 20-25 minute period. And this predates Graham Potter slightly, but it hasn't improved at all under him. And I think it's the mood around the club, isn't it? And obviously we talk about Graham Potter quite a bit, but in terms of the West Ham fans, it's the ownership of the club who are really taking the ire for everything that's going on. I mean, there's a lot of protests in the background, and there's just a lot of discontent. But this has been going on really for years, and we've said before, not really having an identity of what they are, what they want to be. Whereas Crystal Palace do have all that. I'm not sure there's a lot of quality difference between the two teams, but in terms of the defined style, there definitely is.
Yeah, and Oliver Glasner, almost the poster boy for managers who come in and have an impact, which when you're Graham Potter still struggling to scratch the surface of the West Ham malaise, is not the ideal person to have on the opposite dugout. That's much of what awaits on match day 5 of the Premier League. The other games we'll touch on in our special Friday show, so look out for that one, listener. We'll try to have it ready for you sort of Friday lunchtime UK time. Very good. That, I think, wraps it up for us today, though. So, Charlie, lovely to see you.
Great to see you. Thank you.
Duncan, thank you so much for being with us. Also, Mr. Colin Millar, Jake, and producer Charlie in the booth, and you, listener. Hope you've enjoyed the show. Loads more Totallys on the way. For now, from all of us here, it's goodbye. The Totally Football Show podcast is available 3 times a week, bringing you all the football news you could reasonably be expected to care about. We've got views, we've got stats, we've got analysis, we've got some of the best football writers around, and the whole thing is absolutely free. So have a listen on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or all the usual places by clicking on the link below.